So today we're going to be talking about the upcoming circus, which is going to be taking place in August. No, I'm not talking about the Cirque du Soleil. I'm talking about the upcoming boxing bout between Nate Diaz and Jake Paul. This will be taking place at the American Airlines Arena in Dallas, Texas. And it just seems to me that Jake Paul is back to his old tricks after losing against Tommy Fury in a boxing bout. Now, as we know, for anyone who watched the fight between Tommy Fury and Jake Paul got thoroughly outboxed from pillar to post. Tommy Fury was clearly the more experienced boxer, but in saying that, I think Jake Paul, considering his overall experience, he did make a pretty good account for himself. Not too bad for a YouTuber, so I give him a little bit of respect there. But as we know, he's now turned back to his old tricks after losing that contest, and he's fighting retired MMA fighters that are a bit washed up and past their prime. Now, that's something that I don't respect. Now, I'm not saying that Jake Paul isn't a decent boxer. He has been training boxing for quite some time now, so obviously he's developed some sort of skills there. And there is a lot of boxers out there that Jake Paul can beat. Boxers that are actually within his weight class. Boxers that are actually around his age. So I'm not sure what he's getting at by fighting these retired MMA fighters and fighters that he just has a massive size advantage over. You know, it doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove his skills whatsoever. And I just question why he doesn't go down that road instead if he wants to be known as an actual boxer. Now, his upcoming fight with Nate Diaz isn't the first MMA fighter that he's faced. As we know, he did face off against Ben Askren, who wasn't even a striker. As we know, Ben Askren was very well known within his MMA career just to be very one-dimensional. He was mainly a wrestler and his striking was very atrocious. As we know, he's also had 2 fights with Tyron Woodley, who granted isn't a striker, but he did have some striking skills within the UFC and does have a lot of punching power. And within the first contest, it was very, very competitive. But as we know, Tyron Woodley got a rematch and Jake Paul ended up knocking him out. So that was a great performance by Jake, but again, just another fighter out of his prime. I mean, granted, it wasn't a huge size discrepancy like we've seen in the past from Jake Paul, and he did also fight off against Anderson Silva as well and ended up getting the victory there. Now, I feel a bit funny about this whole thing. In saying that, the former MMA fighters are earning a pretty penny as well, so I guess it's not all bad within that respect if you look at it from a monetary standpoint, and I'm sure Jake's done quite well out of this as well. Now, his upcoming fight in August against Nate Diaz, in my opinion, won't be very competitive, just purely because of how much bigger Jake is than Nate Diaz, okay? Skill for skill, I think Nate Diaz is a much better fighter, but I just don't see this ending well for Nate. The guy looks like he's taken a lot of brain damage already, and I just question whether this has been the right decision for him. Because as we know, Nate Diaz has already got a lot of money. He earned a pretty penny off facing Conor McGregor, and he demanded a very high paycheck towards the end of his career, so I'm not sure what Nate Diaz is actually going to get out of this contest, to be quite honest with you. And I do wonder how long this clown show can actually continue. I mean, what do you guys think? I can't see personally Jake Paul continuing to go down this line for much longer, because as we know, he did actually sign with the Professional Fighters League as well. And Jake does have a wrestling background. A lot of people don't know that the Logan brothers are actually pretty good wrestlers. You know, they've wrestled a lot in high school. So for someone like Jake to sign with the PFL, I think he can potentially do quite well there. And Nate Diaz also touched on that he wanted to return to the UFC after this fight with Jake Paul potentially. Now, for me personally, I don't think it's a great move for Nate. I think he's well past it now. He's too old, and I just don't see the point in him returning. His last fight against Tony Ferguson left a lot to be desired for me. Both of them didn't put on a very good performance in my eyes, and it just showed that they need to hang it up now. They need to move on. We've seen this too many times with fighters just continuing to fight past their prime, and I think Nate is one of those fighters that probably does already have a little bit of brain damage, so I don't think he should continue. So I do think after this fight with Nate Diaz, we should potentially hear some news from Jake Paul about his first fight in MMA within the Professional Fighters League. So who do you guys think is going to win this contest? Now, as we all know, Francis Ngannou actually signed with the PFL as well sometime last week. So we've now got Jake Paul and Francis Ngannou in the PFL. And if you're interested to hear my thoughts on that video, feel free to check out the link in the description below. But that's all from me today. If you guys like this sort of content, please feel free to hit subscribe, but only if you are interested in the latest MMA news. Thanks everyone. I'll catch you all later.